your strategy has to be based on your goals. So if your goals are more about, name recognition or building your profile or getting new clients or getting speaking engagements, like that's really important because that's going to change what kind of activities you should spend your time, energy, money pursuing. So, um, I think with any book publicity campaign, it is about, figuring out how to position your book and get your book to the target audience.
Welcome to Beyond Better, a podcast that explores a simple but profound idea. We all deserve to live lives we love, and that includes our work lives too. I'm your host, Stacey Ennis, an author, book coach, speaker, and long-time location-independent entrepreneur living in Portugal with my family of 4. Join me as I talk business, location independence, writing, publishing, and so much more, all focused on building a life that is beyond better. Welcome. This week we're going to talk about something that all authors need, which is PR. As a book coach who focuses on that process of idea to draft, I need to work with really good people who can help authors after I support them in that writing process. And what I find a lot of times is when authors get into the publication and launch of their books, good PR is the make or break of a successful book launch. So I'm really excited that today's guest is going to give us some expert insights, some tips, and share some of her experience. If you are an aspiring author, or even if you've already published a book and you're trying to understand how to continue getting eyes on that book and driving readers to your book, today will be an incredibly valuable episode. So let me introduce you to this week's guest. Leah Paulos, the founder of Book Publicity School and Press Shop PR, has worked at the intersection of books and media for over 25 years. She's led publicity campaigns for hundreds of authors, helping them line up media attention and events and supporting them as they navigate the world of publishing. Leah has long wanted to offer publicity support to more authors than Press Shop PR can accommodate for full media campaigns. Book Publicity School is her answer, allowing her to bring her decades of experience and passion for championing authors to more writers at an affordable price. Leah, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to get to have this conversation. And before we jump in, I'd love to hear a little bit of your origin story, because all of us in the industry have some origin that has to do with books and reading, writing. So how did you get into this work?
Actually started out in journalism. That was my first job out of college. I got an internship at a magazine, which turned into a job as an editor. I was there for several years. So the start of my career was in magazines as a writer and an editor. It was the best training for doing book publicity because all of the components of the work that we do now, I really learned and perfected there. And as an editor, you are, fielding so many pitches from so many different people, from writers, from companies and publicists, from all sorts of entities trying to get coverage. It really forces you to um, figure out what is newsworthy, what is going to be a good story, how to package it. Um, that was really where my training was. I'm one of the rare independent publicists that was never in-house at a publisher. And it really, I think, has served me well. In terms of making the switch, there were a couple of factors. I live in New York, and to be honest, it was a lifestyle situation. I do not like commuting on the subway to Times Square and sitting in a cubicle every day. And that was, back when 5 days a week in the office was non-negotiable. It was, 10 days of vacation. So yeah, I did it for a couple years, and then I just thought to myself, I have to figure out a way to have, to do the work that I love, but to have a lifestyle that I like better. So that was what led me to leave magazines, and I went freelance. And going freelance, what happened was everyone who heard I worked in magazines when I would do a lot of copywriting and writing, and a lot of people picked my brain about how to get into magazines. And that was what sort of set off that light bulb. Oh, wait, maybe I can, be a publicity consultant. And then once I got my first book project, I just ran with it. And the rest is sort of history. One thing led to another.
I love that you have this background in magazines because I also, my early years were in magazine work, both at the first the regional level and then at the national level. And I feel like it's such great training ground for the book world. It's also like one thing I do miss about that industry is that you get like it's a little bit faster to get some return on your investment because you get to see it quicker. With a magazine, it's coming out, whether it's like weekly or monthly or bi-monthly. And I loved that aspect of it. With books, obviously, it's the total opposite, where you're often waiting like up to years to get that thing out to market and get it into readers' hands. But I'm curious, I can point to so many things from my time in the magazine world that I use today, especially in learning how to write in a really effective way that's really engaging, use storytelling, but still make a point and get it in a tight little space. There's a lot of things I took into writing, and of course, many other things as well. What are some of the things that you bring from your magazine experience that you're still using today? Are there any kind of ties to those early years?
Many things, so many things, like you said. I mean, first of all, when you're a magazine editor, everything that you produce it has to be publishable in that format. There aren't people above you. Like, yes, there's the editor in chief that signs off, but you have to make it like perfectly polished, accessible, digestible. So that's one element. I think really figuring out how to package stories is huge, because there's a lot of different ways to cover anything, and you have to find the story, you have to find the angle that is compelling and compelling to your readers. So really sort of understanding what your readership is like, and making sure to tell the stories that are going to keep them interested. That's one thing that we use all the time in our book publicity campaigns. And then, like you said, just figuring out, really learning how to use just an economy of words. You cannot, there's limited space, or at least back in the day when I was there and it was print, it was very limited space. Um, so it forced you to have to, figure out how to say things really concisely. You also couldn't repeat words. I will say one thing. I worked at Lucky Magazine for a while, the magazine about shopping back in the
Oh,
eight.
cool. That's fun.
It was, it was the best training. We would have to write little 25-word captions about 8 handbags, and you had to make them all interesting. And
Mhm.
you could very easily just be like, "Oh, that's a brown slouchy one. That's a cool looking black one." But like, obviously that's not interesting. So you really had to figure out how to tell a teeny tiny little story in that many words without repeating the same language. You can't have everything being called stylish. And obviously this is all a very different topic than book promotion, but the skills are the same. And I lean on those skills all the time.
Oh, that's it's such great training, and I often think about, like, the generation coming up behind us and how they're going to miss some of these really formative, like, skill developments that you get working in these kind of fields and these kind of jobs. One of my, like, maybe a stress nightmare that I might have from time to time is remembering my job when I first got into magazine work. I was a proofreader, so, of course, you start at the bottom, you move your way up. And eventually I was the final proofreader of our print publication, and it went out to 11 million people. And when I tell you I would lie awake at night running through I'm like, "Oh, did I fix that? Oh no, wait." It
Yeah.
was I never want to never want to do that again.
Totally.
It was not my favorite, not my favorite.
Yeah. Yes.
So, I mean, speaking of things changing and the way that, of course, in the magazine industry and the book industry, so much has changed. In PR, absolutely, so much has changed. I think right now, it's a tricky time for authors, especially with now so much influx of AI content that's like making it difficult with so much coming in all the time. And authors often don't know where to put their energy and attention. And do they go to book talk? Is that where they focus? Should they be writing articles? Should they be pitching? Should they be on podcasts? It often feels really hard. And I have, because this is my space, is supporting authors. I also have an author community called the Author Influence Circle. So we're often having these conversations. It's just really hard for an author who has limited time and energy, sometimes limited budget, kind of depends, of course, on the author. I mean, everybody has limited budget, but I mean, some really don't have a lot to spend and some have some that they can invest. How do you decide where to pour your energy and time? And just like a layer to that I'll add, Leah, that I think is important. When we're working with authors, we are not necessarily optimizing for book sales. We are optimizing for business and brand and impact growth. So for them, of course, they want to sell copies, but that is not the highest ROI typically for them is in books sold.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of things to say here. So to your last point there, I mean, that is great. I always suggest, and in all of our workshops at Book Publicity School, one of the first exercises we do is, all right, what are your goals here? Because that's going to decide, your strategy has to be based on your goals. So if your goals are more about name recognition or building your profile or getting new clients or getting speaking engagements, like that's really important because that's going to change what kind of activities you should spend your time, energy, money pursuing. So um, I think with any book publicity campaign, it is about figuring out get your book how to position your book and get your book to the target audience. So once you sort of get that piece of the target audience, then you have to figure out, okay, these two new components, and that's really the basis of any campaign. The way you pitch it, so the press materials, the media pitch, the one sheet, whatever you can call it. But the idea of the book, how you are getting people interested in it. How you're making it really easily digestible quickly because everyone's attention is just shot. You can't take 3 minutes to explain your book from the start. It just needs to be really fast. Once they're interested, you can take more time, but you need to get them interested very quickly. So, really figuring out what that hook is for your target audience, and then, creating an outreach list to those people. So if it's media because you really want to just get your name out there and get more eyeballs on you, because that's going to be part of your, work to get more eyeballs on your website, then great. Then look for the media that are, editors and contacts at the media that speak to that audience. But any publicity campaign does have those two components. Obviously, depending on your goals, the topic, all of that stuff, it's going to, you know, the people on your outreach list are going to change. The types of entities you're going to try and crack are different. Um, but you always need to think about the messaging, the sort of elevator pitch for your book, and who you're going to get it out to. Make sure you're getting it to the right people. I can obviously dive into both of those two elements, which we do all the time, but those are, that is true for any campaign. Um, it sort of is like a puzzle piece, and it's really important to be strategic about it because you can spend you can spend 80 hours a week for a year trying to, do everything out there, like starting a Substack and doing book talk and, having some other newsletter and setting up events. Like you could completely run yourself ragged. And it's not going to be impactful. So you have to be strategic. So that's why I always want to start with the goals, start with what a successful launch would look like for you, and then try to sort of reverse engineer it.
I like that approach because I think it also helps people decide what not to do, where it doesn't make sense to lean in and put energy. I'm still thinking about, maybe somebody who has a book launch coming up, or maybe they've just launched their book recently and they're kind of trying to figure out their ongoing marketing and PR plan, which of course, are different but connected things. Um, and just to share one thing that I've noticed in my own journey with PR, and I've worked with a few different PR people over the years. Of course, I get the best results when I'm working with a PR person because that is like their dedicated work that they're doing. They're experts in it. They're connected, all the things. When I am working on my own and I'm continuing those efforts, and I say on my own, that is very much with Rita, who's the producer of those podcasts, leading and doing all like the vast majority of the work there. So I need to acknowledge that it's not me out there. I think that's important to know because um, it's sometimes when you look at somebody out there doing all the things, you just are like, how could they possibly do it all? And they're not, like, they're not doing it all.
Right.
But one of the things that I found that's been really helpful for us is that we've broken out by quarter really clear focus based on the time horizon for each of the things that we're focusing on, like awards we know are generally in this period of the year. Speaking opportunities, generally you apply in this time of the year. And then podcasts, a lot of what I've found with that is a lot of follow up, like seems to be the name of the game there. So I'm curious to know if an author is listening to this and they're like, this sounds awesome. Maybe, I don't know if your book publicity school is what would walk them through this organizational process, but maybe you could just give them a few initial steps to help them start to get some clarity around how to be successful in their own book project.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, so I mean, we do that definitely is a huge part of what we do at our workshops. I mean, like you said, knowing what to ignore is so important nowadays. I mean, there are 70 billion places where you can get book marketing advice, and you have to know where to focus your attention. I think, like, if I had to give people one thing that they can do to get started, that can sort of cut through the overwhelm a bit and give you a little bit more of a roadmap in the easiest way possible, is to come up with some other books that have come out recently with some similarities. The similarities being they reach a similar audience to yours, the one that you want to reach. Their goals seemingly were basically that they landed in the market in a way that you would like your book to land in the market.
Mhm.
So once you find some of those, and they should be realistic, like a little aspirational, but like not crazy. You don't want to be doing this with like a massive book, like, oh, let's see how, Prince Harry's book landed. Like that's not going to be, that's not going
Yeah.
to be helpful. So a book that's sort of similar. Um, and then get out a spreadsheet. Everyone needs a spreadsheet for book promotion. And just start mapping out, like do a deep dive. Just put on your, sleuthing hat and do a deep dive into what happened with this launch. What did the author do? What did the publisher do? As far as you can tell, you can look around. You can use, just straight up Google News. You can use Perplexity, which is AI research tool, which is really effective. You can use, like, look at the authors, obviously their website, see if they have a really good page. You can look at their social media, just really look at podcast players to see where they spoke. And if you start doing that for a number of different books in your spreadsheet, that's a really good way to get started because, first of all, it takes it out of the abstract. One of the problems is that if you're not trained in publicity and marketing and the publishing world, it just seems really overwhelming. Like, where do I even start? Um, sort of mapping that out for some books is gives you a really clear roadmap. It's, maybe you heard about this book here and you feel like you heard an interview and it was popping up all over, and it's not magic. It's, somebody was one or more people were behind the scenes making these things happen. And so if you start mapping that out on a spreadsheet, that first of all takes it out of the abstract, gives you like, well, it's not magic. This is what happened. Maybe they got like a couple trade reviews, a feature in their local paper. They spoke at, a bookstore, at a local organization and a festival, and they were on 4 podcasts and 2 Substacks mention them, whatever it is. Like, that's helpful information. And then also, if you pick the books well, those can become your targets too. Because if you picked a book that's similar in audience and topic, that will lead you to some venues that are really good for you. So that's the first thing that I would say everybody should do. Try to do it for a number of different books. Um, if you find one book that's really good, maybe you can look at who blurbed it, because typically blurbers are authors in a similar space, maybe with a slightly higher profile. So look and see if their book might also be a good one to check into. Um, if you stumble upon a podcast that's like so perfect for your book, this is exactly, the people you want to be reaching, then maybe look at who else they've spoken to. Maybe they've spoken to some other authors that have similar books that then you can go map it out. So that's sort of the first step that I always recommend, especially if people are feeling like, oh my God, I have no idea where to even begin. That can be really helpful.
I love how practical that is. It's so smart. And something I was thinking about, I'm working on a book right now. And as I'm building out the proposal for this book, there's a lot of opportunity to utilize AI, but I have just chosen not to, except for the extent of like, I'm trying to find a source, or I'd like some initial like I want to do some research for it, and I'm gathering like a list of maybe studies to look at, things like that. And the reason is that a lot of my most important connections have come in the piecing together of things that I'm gathering. So even in doing a comparative analysis, when I'm looking at titles that I hope mine would be on the same shelf as, um, that would be super easy to go into ChatGPT and say, give me a comparative analysis. Here's the book I'm working on. But the amount of clarity I've gained from going through the process of building that myself has been really, really, really important. So I'd be curious to know. I mean, you mentioned the Perplexity, which I think sounds like a fabulous tool to use. And there's a lot of reasons why you would integrate AI into some of this. But I would be inclined to like labor over this a bit, because you're also going to have your own creative ideas, or you're going to remember like, oh, I know Jane at this place and she might be able to make a connection for me. I imagine there's a lot in that strategy building that is also creative and
Yeah,
requires some introspection.
definitely. So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, I think we are sort of in this environment where there are so many different places popping up and venues. It's not like, oh, there's 150 places and like that's what you need to target. There's so many, it's impossible to stay on top of them. So we are sort of like all hands on deck. Like, I think that I always think I agree with you that sort of getting into the weeds is really helpful, because it does get you like give you different ideas. And you always also want to, like, when you go down these little research rabbit holes, I always tell people to sort of have 2 minds about it. Like, on one hand, remember what you're doing, like keep a focus, but also at the same time, if you stumble upon like, oh, this book and this author spoke at this conference, and then you go peek over at this conference and you're like, oh my God, like, and that gives you like a tons of ideas, like different authors that could be good comps. Maybe I could even reach out to that conference. Oh, look, this conference is being sponsored by these 3 entities. Let me go check out those. Like, you want to leave space for that, because that is really helpful. And it does give you that sort of like in the weeds, like pounding the pavement type, benefit that is really helpful in publicity. So, we think of adding something like Perplexity or ChatGPT as complementary, definitely not something that should replace the work because then you will miss out on it. Um, but also it's a wild world out there. And if you could get a little bit of help, or if you do it and then you put it into Perplexity and it gives you other ideas, like amazing.
Yeah.
And then you can start to go research those and go dig down those holes.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot. Another thing that I know you're a big proponent of is having this mindset of self promotion is essential to your success in PR. And this is so hard, as you know, for authors. I know that a lot of the authors I work with, they really, really struggle from going from the writing process where it's very much cozy, especially if they're working with me as a coach. We're meeting every 2 weeks. It's very safe and it's just us. And then, now they move into editing and then publishing. And of course, this is now widening. And then they should really be all the while promoting their work, but some are and some aren't. And I find that it takes a while for authors, even when I am actively encouraging them to really get comfortable with starting to share, starting to promote their work. I think there's this worry that they're going to be annoying or they're going to be, like people are going to get sick of hearing about their work. But we both know that really like that key, along with good PR to a successful launch, an author being clicked in and being in it and like knowing that they influence the success of their book and they can influence it is so important. I'd love for you to tell a little bit about that and how you see that showing up for authors that are successful, not just in the launch, but the long term aspect of their book.
Yeah, I mean, I see it all the time as well. That for all sorts of reasons, people feel uncomfortable with it. I mean, I think just mindset wise, one thing I sort of say is like just imagine you have a friend you really care about who is like an artist of some sort, and they've worked so hard on like all these paintings, say, and they have this like exhibit, and they've been working so hard, and they finally landed this exhibit, and then it's going to be up and it's so exciting. And if they said to you, just imagine if they were like, well, I don't know, I don't really want to email people and like let them know because like, oh God, it just seems so egotistical. You'd be like, are you kidding me? Like, this is your work. This is worthwhile like work. You have so much talent. You put in so much work. Of course you have to promote it. How is anyone else going to know about it if you don't promote it? And it's really the same thing with a book. Like, it's the same exact thing. You have to let people know it's a different environment. It is not like in the, you know, n- 1990s or 2000s, not to date myself, but where publishers
Yeah,
would,
you can date me as well with
yeah,
the very much a 90s kid over here.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, where publishers are able to do all of the promotion. It just falls on authors to do a lot of it. We're just also in a different culture, which for all the downsides of it, there are many. We are in a culture now where it's just much more accepted. Everybody does it. Everyone knows it. I mean, I think if you have to sort of get out of the mindset of like the pre-social media world on some level where maybe it would feel tacky. Now it's like everybody promotes their stuff. That's like what social media pretty much is, like LinkedIn, that's where people that's what they do. So I would just say, keep in mind that um it's sort of necessary these days. No one is going to think about it as much as you are. You're going to be the most critical one about it. Most people are going to, I mean, not that this makes it better, but most people aren't even going to think about it because they're also getting a lot of other emails, and they're just not even going to pay any attention to that element except for maybe like, oh, Stacey has a book. Cool. Awesome. Let me check it out. Like, they're not going to think like, oh, they're not going to be thinking up through the psychology of, oh my God, should she have emailed me? Should she have not? you know,
And they're too worried about what you think about them anyway to be focused on what they think about you. That's like
totally.
human
Yeah,
nature, right? Like we're in our own minds, not
exactly. Yeah.
so
I
worried
mean,
about
it's the
other
same
people.
advice people have for public speaking. Like, Nobody's like, most people are probably like itching to look at their phone while you're giving the speech, and you're like, oh my God, freaking out. Um, so that's what I would say there. I mean, I think the other sort of mindset tweak you can do is, instead of thinking about promoting yourself, it's promoting your work, which, you obviously are proud of and think it deserves an audience. So you can sort of try and pivot a little bit to thinking of it as like you're promoting your work, as opposed to like me, 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 me. And then the other thing I would say about that is there just is no way around it these days that you almost need to think of it like an entrepreneur thinks of, a business. You're running a teeny tiny little business with one product, which is your book. And nobody tries to start a business or, open a cafe or do any kind of work that they want to be successful without thinking about the promotion and acting on it. You just don't do it. Nobody, and it's not just the launch, like anything that opens, it's not just like, okay, hooray, it's open. We're going to do a grand opening party or this or that. It's like, no, you show up every day and you iterate on what works, and you discard what doesn't work, and you brainstorm, maybe you hit a plateau, and then you come up with some other thing and you brainstorm that angle. It just takes work. And it's, I think, especially if it's a book where you have sort of business goals or a goal that is, around your raising your reputation or whatever it is, like, yeah, that's a business goal too. And you have to think of it in business terms. So, every entity needs promotion.
Yeah, it's a good mindset to have, that you have to treat it like a business. It's absolutely true. I would love to hear a success story that you could share with us about an author who had a really thoughtful, targeted publicity effort, and maybe you can share a little detail of how they did it, and what the results were at the end.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, again, because it varies for every book, I'll just share a couple things that have worked for different people. So one thing to keep in mind is that, and this is true if you are, especially with nonfiction, and if there's sort of a component of you where it's not you just promoting your work as like a novelist, like there is a little more goal oriented. Don't be afraid you to stray a little bit from the book if needed. So one thing that I see all the time right now in particular is almost all the books that like we're working on and that are coming out now, were written, before AI, before the new American administration, um, and all of the political cultural changes that have come.
Hmm.
Um, and it's landing in a different world. And so some of the books you kind of need to pivot a little bit to speak speak to your expertise, and whatever expertise you're sharing in your book, you might, now that things have changed so much, you don't want to get caught on, talking specifically about the examples in the book if they are a little dated. Use your expertise to speak to what's happening now. Like, that's how you're going to get more coverage, to say like, okay, my expertise is in, I don't know, whatever it is, like, how to lead groups or business groups through change or something, and maybe you were using a bunch of examples that were more relevant 2 years ago, and now it's like, well, okay, now AI is changing everything. And maybe if there's some element of your entity that is interacting with tariffs, maybe that's changing. So like, don't get stuck on those examples. Use the current examples, because that's how you're going to get attention. News people, media people need to talk about um, what is happening now, and they use your book to have a conversation about now, with sort of grounded in your expertise. So we've done that with a number of books. I mean, so many. It's hard to say. We pull on that thread a lot because it is so useful. So if something happens in the news, like, okay, write talking points that only you, given your experience, insights, expertise, can give, and go out with that and try and get interviews based on those. So it's grounded in the book. The book is supporting you. Um, but it's you always have to think about, like, what will a media person or someone who's booking talks, what do they need? They don't need to cover your book. They don't need to have you speak about your book. They need to create a conversation that their audience is going to be interested in, and their audience is living in the current moment, so it has to be relevant to the current moment. So keep that in mind, that you always want to come with the best, most current story possible. uh,
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting too. What I find interesting about media is that when you do hit on that moment that connect and you can make that connection, it's like you could be pitching a place for a year and get absolutely no traction. And then the right thing hits the right pitch, and suddenly you got this amazing attention on your book. And to your point, I think that a lot of authors don't focus enough on what's relevant to the media cycle, to the news cycle, to what people are paying attention to. And that's probably something you have to learn how to attune yourself to be able to like pay attention to what's happening and be able to craft that pitch, which is also where like an excellent PR person comes in. So this is all such useful information. I want to ask you the question that I ask all of my wonderful guests. And of course, because we have readers and writers that listen to this podcast, if you could recommend one book to listeners, so it's one that has really profoundly impacted your life, what would it be and why?
um that is so hard, as somebody who's worked on 400-ish books and
Yes, I know.
big reader, so I think I may have to cheat and share a couple. Um, I love, love, love a book. We worked on it, actually. It's called The Sounds of Life. It is about how digital technology and in advances in acoustics and AI allow scientists to actually hear the natural world in a way that we never have before. Fascinating book. I think about it when I go for like a walk in the woods, because you're like, oh, okay, you can appreciate nature, but we're not able to pick up on so many of the um of what's happening, all the life that's happening, and now they can, and it's just a riveting book that I think about every time I walk out. There's also a book called Areas of Fog by Will Dowd that I absolutely love. It is these teeny, short little essays about the weather, and he
Mm.
absolutely manages to bring out the sort of delight. It's has this like sense of whimsy, and just is this wonderful way of grounding you in the present and finding the sort of just delight and whimsical joys in the everyday. Um, so I'll leave it with those two.
Oh, those sound amazing. Thank you for sharing those. I'll have to add them to my TBR. Um, this was such a wonderful and useful conversation. I know you've inspired an aspiring author or a published author to really take a look. I love that idea of looking at the other, comparable titles out there, seeing the ones that have been successful and gaining, like, why reinvent the wheel? That's such a great tip. And I'd love for you to share with our listeners, our viewers, where they can find you, where they can learn more about your work. Yeah, where's the best place to learn more about you?
Yeah. So the best place is probably on our website, bookpublicityschool.com. That's where we have all of the different workshops and coaching programs we have. The media sheet has or the media page, I'm sorry, has a lot of different interviews and pieces we've written, which is, you know, we'll give you even more ideas. And we have a blog that has a lot of ideas. And of course, that will lead you out to our social media as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. I really appreciate you being with me today and sharing so much of your expertise and wisdom with our audience.
It was really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to you, our listener or viewer, for tuning in with us today. I really hope that this has supported you in your author journey and that you got some really good, actionable tips, but also maybe a mindset shift today. I also have to say thank you, as always, to Rita Dominguez for her production of this podcast. As I tell you every week, you would not be listening to or watching this without her. She is the reason that everything I do shows up in the world, and I am grateful. And if you are still listening, it must mean you really, really loved this show or this video on YouTube. So if you would take a moment to rate and review the podcast or hit the little bell, subscribe and hit the little bell on YouTube, that would number one, make sure that you don't miss these episodes that are going to support your author journey, but also it really helps me reach more people with the message of living a life that is not just better, but beyond better. And I will be back with you before you know it.